that for those of you that may not know, the theme that we've been following during this visit is personalities from Ramayana. And in the morning class, we were discussing about Vali and Sugriva. We didn't get to finish, so we're continuing part 2, Vali and Sugriva. Is there anybody here that's unfamiliar with Ramayana and needs a little background on who Vali and Sugriva are? Here's the last we touched on. On the left side, that's Tara, the wife of Vali, and she's giving some wise advice to Vali. On the right side, we see Sugriva roaring outside of Kishkinda for a second fight, even just after he just got whooped really bad. And Tara advises him, Vali, don't go. There must be, here's a reason. Why would he come again after just practically being beaten to death by you, and now he's coming back again? There must be something. And the Angada, our son, had some spies report back to him that Sugriva has made friendship with Ram. And it must be that he has this bold confidence now because he's got Ram on his side. And I advise you, don't go. Just make friends with Sugriva. And everything will be nice. But Vali, who usually listens to the wise advice of his good wife Tara, because she's very wise, he doesn't, because his anger gets the best of him. And so he goes out for battle. And we found out from this morning's class, one of the reasons why Ram didn't kill Vali the first time is because he said he couldn't tell the difference between the two brothers. They looked too much alike, etc., etc. There's a whole host of reasons, like 7 pages worth of reasons why he didn't. And you probably all have received that, so we won't go over that discussion. So now comes battle number 2. And when it's battle number 2, it starts off the same way. They seem to be, rather equal in combat. But Vali has this golden chain that was given to him by Indra, his father. And it has this magical potency of being able to take away half of the strength of any opponent in battle. A very good formula. Whatever your strength is compared to another person's strength, half of their strength goes to you, the other half stays with them plus your strength. And he's already very strong. So he's always going to win. So they battle for some time. It looks like he's going to finish Sugriva after some time. But then finally Ram shoots his arrow. And he shoots him in the chest. He doesn't instantly die. But Vali, as you see gesturing here, is making some criticism of Ram. You're well known as being a noble person, a follower of Dharma and virtue, but look what you've done. And he gives his complaints or criticisms about Ram's behavior. And there's a little section here. This is where it's from Valmiki Ramayana, chapters 17 and 18 from Kishkinda Kanda, where he says, and then Ramchandra replies. So here's the first what Ramchandra replies. O Vali, it seems that with the deterioration of the body, even the intelligence gets deteriorated. You are accusing me of immorality without understanding the intricacies of Dharma. So we'll go over Vali's objections. There's in subsequent chapters, they're not laid out like this, but this makes it very clear. What merit is there in killing someone who is not facing you? Meaning, codes of warfare is you face the opponent on an equal stand, and you're hiding behind a tree. I'm fighting somebody else, and you're shooting me dead. Why kill me when I'm in combat with someone else? And he goes on to the next thing, but Ram's reply is, I intended to preserve Lord Indra's promise to you, the necklace benediction. Now, one of the things that Vishnu or Krishna or Ram do is when a benediction is given by someone, in this case it was Indra, there's a detail that Brahma confirmed that the benediction that Indra was giving was to be upheld. So Ram's not going to interfere with Indra's benediction. But if he fought with Indra, he would, because Indra is not going to kill Ram. Or, excuse me, Vali is not going to kill Ram. Ram's going to kill Vali. So to uphold, there's no direct combat. Clear? Clear? Okay. And he made a promise to Sugriva, and he's going to uphold this promise to Sugriva. You have not punished the wrongdoer, meaning the wrongdoer in his estimation is Sugriva. The wrong of Sugriva in his estimation is he put a big boulder in front of the cave that I was inside battling with Mayavi. And then he took the royal seat. So he's the wrongdoer. You should punish him. And Ram's reply, your wrongdoing is evident, exiling your son like younger brother and abducting his wife. Now, there's two things in codes of Dharma. It's a detail, but it's an important detail. It's double bad. There's cohabiting with another man's wife, and specifically having some intimate contact with the wife of one's younger brother. It's double bad. So you're sinful, and you're the wrongdoer, and there's punishment for such sin. Commensurate with that sin is death penalty. So I've done my duty. I've not violated duty. I've done my duty. His fourth objection. In your country or city, I did no misdeed. So that's one of the codes where someone can be punished. You go to their place and you do a misdeed, and you're subject to be punished. And Kishkinda is not your jurisdiction. And Ram says, the entire earth is the property of the Ikshvaku dynasty. So it's certainly our jurisdiction. And what you did is within our jurisdiction. I've come here within the jurisdiction of the Ikshvaku dynasty. Rules the whole earth. You have punished me who am free of any guilt. I'm innocent. Ram says, your guilt is illicit connection with your younger brother's wife. And it's not the quality befitting a king or a leader. We don't have a dispute of land, gold, or silver between us, which is another one of the Manusmriti regulations. That's not the issue, not land, gold, or silver between us. When I left Ayodhya, Bharata and I had an agreement. He will rule over the citizens in the cities and towns, while I will rule over the forest dwellers under his jurisdiction. It is my duty to keep order. If there's a wrongdoer, commensurate with the wrong of the wrongdoer, it's the duty of a king, or it's a duty of an administrator to correct the situation with a proper reprimand or punishment. And part of the explanation is, if that duty or obligation is not performed, then the king or the administrator receives the karma or the reaction or the bad result according to the wrong that the wrongdoer did. The king bears the consequences of wrongdoings of citizens. Your primary aspiration is to kill without probing into good or bad. To be you or not you. And that's not so. He doesn't say this, but he knows the codes of Dharma. But not only that, he knows the codes of Dharma as the equivalent of Supersoul, or Supersoul is his expansion. And Supersoul certainly knows what's good and bad. One who knows what's Dharma knows what's good and bad. The eighth objection, how will you face criticism by scholars? Those who know Dharma and know the scripture will criticize you. How are you going to stand up to them? I have not acted whimsically. I have followed the predecessors, kings, and abided by duty indicated within scripture. Unnecessary killers are destined for hell. Again, it's the duty of a king to punish sinners who cohabit with their younger brother's wife. Killing such a sinner does not accrue sin. And there's three more. You are killing an herbivore animal. And my skin or flesh is useless for human use. Because sometimes animals are killed because there's utility of their skin. But you can't use my skin for anything, for human use. There are 5 kinds of nailed animals that are unfit for human use. They're quite similar. Ram says, even you consider yourself an animal. And according to Dharma, hunters may kill an animal from behind a tree or bush. There's more. I would have brought back Maitili, that's Sita, to you in one day. He's so powerful, he already whooped Ravana. I can overcome Ravana and bring Sita back to you. You could have asked me. Sugriva is like Lakshmana to me. We mutually agreed to help each other recover our wives from our aggressors. Sugriva's mandate is to find Maitili, not to bring her to me. That's quick 2 sections of Kishkinda Kanda. Now, there's a common question that comes, my experience is, why did he do it this way? I mean, there's N possibilities of other ways he could have done it. So why did he go through Sugriva, and why this and why that and why the other thing? And we don't question the personality of God. Did he do it the right way? Maybe I would do it better than he did it, or some kind of thinking like that. There's multiple purposes when going back to Hanuman's appraisal of Ram's pastimes. We discussed this already, just to repeat. There's a very nice pair of verses in 5th canto, chapter 19, Srimad Bhagavatam. where there's a set of 10 prayers by Hanuman to Lord Ramachandra. And in two of those prayers, he says essentially, when Ramachandra appears, he doesn't just come to annihilate Ravana, but he also comes to teach. So there are things that he wants to teach, and when he does things, it's one of the reasons he does things the way he does things. He wants to teach. So there's this discussion back and forth about what's dharma and what's adharma. And it takes one to know the higher principles of dharma to know what dharma is. Because one who doesn't know what dharma is may get it the opposite. What is not to be done is to be done. What is to be done is not to be done. Exactly what Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita. Knowledge in the mode of ignorance. Stepping back, the big picture is Ramayana has a potency, a power, and an intention to inspire in the people who hear it and narrate it to live by codes of virtue. In principle, never deviate from virtue, always abide by virtue, the plus and the minus. But what's virtue? How do you understand whether you turn left or right? Well, Ramayana has many, many, many episodes where some guidelines or guidance as to what is to be done, what is not to be done, even in worldly things. Now, the higher principle, of course, is even when doing worldly things, the purpose should be to please the personality of Godhead. That's the overarching theme of Ramayana. Surrender to the personality of Godhead. But surrender then also means do that which is pleasing to. And that's important as well. So this is a detailed section of Dharma and Adharma. Because going way back to the starting point of this starting class, one who abides by Dharma is protected by Dharma. It's in Manu's teachings, Manu Smriti. Dharma rakshata rakshataha. Raksha means protection. One who abides by Dharma is protected by Dharma. And one who surrenders to Ram is protected by Ram. That's paradharma. We've been discussing these two, Dharma, paradharma. We need to know what's Dharma and what's adharma. This is some instruction. Now he is angry. He's just been shot in the chest by an arrow. It is very painful, and he says it. And so this is a painting where he's with folded palms. He's requesting forgiveness. Look at his condition. He's requesting forgiveness because the forgiveness was offending Ram. So he offers his respects to Ram. You're right. I'm the offender. And Tara advised me not to make amends with Sugriva, but I didn't listen. And Ram then speaks transcendental knowledge at this stage. He consoles Vali. One of the things he says to Vali, one who dies in a circumstance like this will surely go to heaven. And one of the questions that has come up more than once, in Ayodhya, in Lanka, or in the forest, when demons are killed, what's their destination? Those who are demons that are killed by Ramachandra, what's their destination? Heaven. There's a particular heaven that we don't hear much about, but the commentators explain. There's a Vira Svarga. Vira means, strength. Those that are courageous in battle, that's where they go. It's similar to the idea that's in Bhagavad Gita. distinct from those that are killed by Vishnu forms. This is described in the Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 2, Chapter 7, something like text number 27. That Chapter 7 is a list of avatars, not a comprehensive list, but a partial list. And when that description gets to Krishna, there's a lot of verses, and one, there's a really long verse that lists the names of the persons who, killed by Krishna, they achieve the spiritual destination, not just heaven. And even it includes those who are killed by Krishna's devotees. They achieve the spiritual realm because they're doing on behalf of Krishna, like those killed by Arjuna, or those killed in Krishna's presence by Arjuna, and whoever else. So part of this exchange becomes important. You see in the painting here, Vali is wearing this golden necklace given to him by Indra. So normally something like this would be given to one's son. But he gives this necklace to Sugriva, not his son, in explicit acknowledgement of his wrongs done to Sugriva. Vali then gives good advice to his son. Don't hold anything against Sugriva. He speaks to Sugriva, don't hold anything against my son. Treat my son like your own son. This is my parting request. And he advises Sugriva to listen to Tara's wise advice. She always gives wise advice, so please listen to her whenever she speaks up, because you'll benefit by it. And in Ramchandra's presence, he leaves his body. And that's the end of Vali. There's some remaining description in this section of Sugriva. And one of the outstanding things about Sugriva we already discussed when the friendship making was made between him and Ram. It was not only formal, but it was eternal. That is, dasya, sakya, friendship. And that's a relationship, and a very important relationship as far as Ram is concerned. There was, we already discussed it, there was some sensual weakness on Sugriva's part when he became king. But there wasn't any weakness of heart. And when he was reminded, all it took was some words from Hanuman and a couple of strong words from Lakshman. And this is a symptom of one who internally is a Vaishnav. Even this happens with Dhruva and happens with others. Even they may get off course. All it takes is a little tap on the shoulder, a little reminder from an elevated person, and they're back on course. Because their heart, the orientation of their heart, is towards the orientation of surrender, the personality of Godhead. So they're very pliable. But sometimes, even those elevated souls get a little off. It happens. There's several such places as that. So Griva was like that. He waffled a bit on the sensual, but not on the heart level. And everything worked out. Here's some of the following his becoming the ruler in Kishkinda. Sugriva makes a pledge to assist Ram. He lapses a bit. Then just by reminding, he acts properly. This is just a very quick summary. A very important passage is Sugriva, when all the Vanaras get sent in different directions, he singles out Hanuman and audibly in front of Ram, he speaks of his confidence that you are the best, and surely somehow you'll be successful in finding Sita. And that becomes a significant part of Ram's empowering Hanuman. When the Vanaras come back, so they depart, then Sita is found, they come back. And when they come back, there's this very special forest area, Madhuvan forest, outside of Kishkinda, and the Vanaras go wild, eating honey and, become intoxicated and eating fruits. And there's a member of Sugriva's team, is Dadimukha, is supposed to look after that forest. It's like a special place for the Vanaras. And he gets really worried. He goes and reports this to Sugriva. Before even seeing the situation, Sugriva can understand. They're celebrating. That means they found Sita. Don't worry, everything will be all right. Let them celebrate. They found Sita. And they've been off in difficult times for quite some time. We find this other exchange with Sugriva in relation to accepting Vibhishan. Another good example. He's kind of like traumatized by what Vali did. And when he sees Ram and Lakshman, he's like trusted. When he sees Vibhishan coming from Ravana's side, I don't trust him. And he goes on and on about it. On and on and on. So, but when he hears sufficiently from Lord Ramachandra, there was a question. I looked it up. You gave some verses, but a nice lucid translation. Ram gives Sugriva an example of a hunter and two birds. Now, some version says a dove, but at least two birds, male, female bird. And the hunter kills the male bird. Female kills the female bird. Okay, kills the female bird. That's not how I remember. And the hunter then comes to the other bird and asks for something to eat, some refreshments. And the remaining bird says, I don't have anything, but you can take my life. So to perform hospitality. So Ram says, when to speak of a bird, I'm a king, fighter by Dharma. So when someone comes to receive shelter, how can I refuse them? Whatever, even if they've done some wrong or some harm. And you're concerned, anyway, the whole long explanation. You're concerned about my safety, supposing Vibhishan has a bad motive or supposing this or that. Do you think the Rakshasas can hurt me? He goes through this whole expression of his divinity. He says, kind of like Krishna lifting up Govardhan Hill with the little finger of his left hand. He said, with the tip of my little finger, I can destroy all these Rakshasas. The whole of Lanka finished. Not only in Lanka, anywhere and everywhere, finished. Effortless. I don't even need the other fingers. So don't worry. For my safety. But my principle is when someone takes shelter, I give them shelter. So Sugriva becomes convinced, and just by hearing, he accepts Ram's conclusion. And not only that, he carries Ram's conclusion to Vibhishan and invites him to come forward. That's dramatic and significant in the process of surrender. We discussed that already. Uh, Shuka is a spy, and he comes disguised, and he has a conversation with Sugriva, and he says, Ravan wants to know. You give a message back to Ravan. His issue is not with you. His issue is with Ram. So why go through some big difficulty? Just accept the Ravan's hospitality and everything will be nice. What do you say? And Sugriva was indignant, and Ram said, "You got to give him an answer." So he gave him a heavy answer. I'm the servant of Ram. I pledged my loyalty to Ram, and so Ram has my help and my entire army's help, because it was a divide and conquer kind of strategy from Ravan. So Sukha went back and gave him that message. When before the battle began, the Vanaras are outside the fortress of Ravan, and they see him standing on one of the edges of the fortress, looking over, getting an assessment of the Vanara army. And Sugriva is so enraged, he jumps and attacks Ravana and bites his nose and scratches his side and gouges him. And Ravana is very surprised. He throws him down, and Sugriva jumps up and jumps back to the. He hurt Ravan. And this is even before there's a battle. He's Rama was appreciative, but make your efforts wise. Supposing you were hurt, be not very good for the battle. There's many situations during the course of the battle where he single-handedly contacts and defeats great generals and soldiers in Ravan's side. One of the first ones mentioned is this one, Pragasha. During when Indra shot his serpentine arrows and Sugriva sees he's beside himself. He's very attached to Ram. Ram is very attached to him. When Ravan came out, this is later, doing direct battle, he would did hand-to-hand combat with Ravan. Ravan stepped back and shot him in the chest with an arrow. It doesn't say anything came of that, just he received one of Ravan's arrows. Later, Kumbhakarna comes out of the palace, big roaring scene, attacking this one, that one, the other one. He knocks Sugriva unconscious. And he picks up Sugriva, puts him under his arm, and marches back into the palace, thinking if the general is defeated, the army is weakened. And Sugriva regains consciousness, and he hurts Kumbhakarna really badly. He bit off his ear. He bit off the end of his nose. He clawed his side. He jumped up in the air, and Kumbhakarna's roaring. Nobody has ever done this to Kumbhakarna. Sugriva was a big fighter. At night, and this is one of those questions. Why was there fighting at night? Because we know from Mahabharata, when it's between a Kshatriya and a Kshatriya, when the sun sets, that's it. And the answer that's given is, this is not between a Kshatriya and a Kshatriya. It's Rakshasas and Kshatriyas. So the same rule doesn't apply. In the first evening, the Rakshasas continued attacking all night long. They gained strength. So after the situation with Ram and Lakshman being hit by the serpentine arrows of Indrajit, as soon as that was cleared up, Sugriva called for an attack at night. Here's some of the other demons that were killed by him. When the battle was over, these are just some highlights on Sugriva's service and his mood of relationship with Ram. He wanted that the Vanaras could go with him back to Ayodhya. Ram decided to stop in Kishkinda on the way, and he had the wives of the Vanaras come. There's the Pushbook of Vimana was very expandable, very big, and it got bigger and bigger. When they did reach Ayodhya, Bharata says to Sugriva, of course he wasn't with them the whole time, but he has come to understand, you are like a fifth brother to us all. And that's how he was regarded by them. It's how Ram regarded them, like a brother. And he finally attended Ram's coronation and then returned back to Kishkinda, Sugriva. So that's the conclusion of this personalities of Ramayana specific to Vali and Sugriva. And the next personality that I speak about is Lakshmana. So let's go there. Now everybody knows about Lakshmana. So we're going to hear something about Lakshmana. He's dearmost amongst the brothers. The four brothers took birth in the following manner. They were having big problem with Ravana because Lord Brahma gave a benediction that they couldn't do anything. So they went to Brahma and said, please fix the problem. You made it really difficult for us. So Brahma then went to Lord Vishnu, or when the demigods were above the yajna that was intended for producing sons for Dasarath, they were there, according to the text, generally speaking, prior to this Kali Yuga. When there were yajnas for the demigods, they would personally come and receive the alms and the oblations into the sacrificial fire. And so they were above the sacrificial fire. And Lord Vishnu also came, so they took the opportunity to explain to Lord Vishnu, Brahma in particular, saying, I made this mistake. I gave these benedictions to Ravan, and now he's a monster. And so, can you do something to help? And Vishnu at this time said, yes, not only I can do something to help, but just now, in this yajna that's being performed below, I will appear as four sons of Dasarath. All four of the sons of Dasarath will be my expansions. And here's another painting indicating the same. Vishnu is making this pledge to them. Vanquish the evil Ravana. Here's another painting of the same. There's Vishnu speaking to the demigods. There's on the right side is Brahma, then Shiva and Ganesh, and this one, that one. So now they're reassured. The yajna is going on. Rishishringa is performing the yajna, and from the sacrificial fire, a great celestial being rises, carrying the payasam. Sometimes it's translated as porridge. And he gives directly to Dasarath and instructs him to distribute this amongst his queens. So here's another painting that looks quite the same, but it's slightly different. Rishishringa is there, and Vashishta is there, and the queens are there. Dasarath is there. Whoever this being is that comes out of the fire is there. And he then follows the instruction of the personality that gave the payasam. He distributes to his queens. And there's this standard explanation. Half he gave to Kaushalya, and then the other half he divided to two, and so forth and so on. So the one half of the remaining half went to Sumitra. One half of the remaining half went to Kaikeyi, and then again he gave the remaining one half of that one half to Sumitra, which means Sumitra had twins. So here's on the right side is Dasarath receiving the payasam, and on the left side he's distributing it to his queens. And then 4 sons were born. The detail is they were born one day apart. There's this very specific description of the days are determined by the moon moving through different nakshatras, not just the rising and setting of the sun. And so their birth star was one movement of the sun after the next, after the next. So first was Ram, and Ram Navami. The very next day, Bharata is born. And the very next day, the twins, Lakshmana and Shatrughna, were born as sons of Sumitra. And it looks like the twins are on the top up here. And then there's one son here, and there's one son there. So one of these is Ram, the other is Bharat, and then the twins. And here's the celebration. Sons are born, Haribol. And here's the demigods celebrating also. Look like this is Dasarath receiving the celebration message from his followers. Now in Padma Purana it says one thing, the who is Ram and who are the other 3. And in the Bhagavatam and in Ramayana, it speaks in this way. Ram is the manifestation of Vasudev, or Vasudev. Lakshman is Sankarshan. Bharata is the manifestation of Pradyumna, and Shatrughna, the manifestation of Aniruddha. So we've had like lots of examples of this. When there's one explanation in this scripture and a very different explanation in another scripture, how are you supposed to process that? Let me. You want the microphone? No, I see. We've been referring to this repeatedly because there's lots of examples. Padma Purana has a verse which says, Shatakoti, which means 1 billion. There's Shatakoti versions of Ramayana. And when one finds discrepancies or differences between one Ramayana and another Ramayana, the learned souls have said it should be understood to be due to the Lord performing his pastimes in slightly variegated ways in different days of Brahma. So the standard expression here is Kalpabheda, different day of Brahma. So differences. But for our purposes, and specifically even for Valmiki Ramayana, the understanding given by the commentators is that Lakshmana is the original spiritual master. Just like Balaram, there's a whole chapter 3 of Chaitanya Charitamrita describing Balaram's position. He's the original spiritual master. So anyone who performs the function of spiritual master as a representative or is carrying the Guru Tattva that comes from the original Guru, Balaram. And Lakshman is such a person. And there are some examples. We'll cover some of them in the course of this discussion on the personality of Lakshmana. One celebrated one is Ram's disapproval of the fact that Sugriva honored Ram but didn't honor Lakshman. And the situation is right after the vows of friendship. Sugriva arranged for a sitting place for Ram. Some leaves from some tree, and he sat him down, and he sat next to him. And Ram looked disapprovingly. And Hanuman also looked disapprovingly at that action. So there's a detail, it's subtle detail, but Hanuman got some sandalwood branch and placed that for Lakshman to sit. Because the spiritual master is to be honored as good as God. And Lakshman has that function in relation to Ram. No, he does many other things too, but that's one of his functions. Like in Balaram's relationship with Krishna, he has many functions. Or Lord Nityananda's relationship with Lord Chaitanya, he has many functions. But before the relationship, but he has a function of guru. It's the expansion of the personality of Godhead that carries the guru tattva function. So he's to be honored. And that was the explanation given because Sugriva had made this mistake or disrespect, not properly respecting Lakshman. Ram quietly and subtly and very generously corrected it. He corrected it by having him bow before Lakshman when Lakshman gave that garland or the vine going around his neck so he could see the distinction between the two. Ram wanted that Lakshman be respected. Now, Lakshman has other sides to him also, which we'll hear. He has a protecting Ram side, like strong. And when he wants to protect Ram, he's like fire. And sometimes Ram has to cool him out. And he listens, and sometimes he's really, we'll hear. Well, I'm going to read some this evening. But this is an important aspect of his function in Ramayana, or what our regard for him should be as we hear Ramayana. Now, there are 4 brothers, and they're born one day apart. And they're very dear to the whole of certainly Dasrath and their mothers, but the whole of Ayodhya. And here's another nice P.G. Sharma painting of the 4 boys and one of the mothers and Dasarath. In Valmiki Ramayana, this is to be noted, there's no specific childhood activities described, like there's abundant childhood activities in Krishna's Leela. I mean, abundant, the major portion of the 10th canto. In Balakanda, there's these short number of verses 23 through 36. It doesn't give specific, but it just speaks of general things about the four boys and those who are growing up. And the very next verse after those general things, Dasrath begins to contemplate their marriage. So we don't hear a whole lot about their childhood pastimes. It would be nice. Maybe there's some Ramayana that does, but not Valmiki Ramayana. Lakshman specifically has special affection. He's one of the twins, but he has special affection not for his twin as much as he does for Ram. And so they're inseparable. Said that Ram wouldn't eat unless Lakshman was there to eat with him. He wouldn't take rest unless Lakshman was there to take rest with him. And Lakshman was like the same with Ram. They were inseparable. Some children are like that, and these two were like that. The commentators say the meaning of his name is derived from the goddess of fortune, Lakshmi, and so Lakshmana means one who is rich with the wealth of service to Ram. The meaning of his name. We hear his name. That's what we should be thinking. And they were very kind and affectionate to one another, and similarly, Bharata was equally dear to Shatrughna and vice versa. Although they're not the twins together, there was that kind of affection between them. With Ram's leadership, they all followed, and one of the rules by which Ram lived, they also followed, and that is whatever situation one is in, whatever difficulty or circumstance, whatever, one follows Dharma, so the principles of truthfulness and instructions of wise superiors. One of the wise superiors that worked closely with them when they were young is Vashishta. Again, it doesn't give details, it just speaks that their military training as young Kshatriya boys came from Vashishta. He taught them archery and all the other principles of Kshatriya living. And the very next, we hear much about Lakshman is his journey together with Vishwamitra, Ram, going to deal with Tataka and Subahu and Maricha and deliver Ahalya and break the bow. Those are some of the principal events, along with telling of histories. At the end of the first day, these two receive mantras, the Ati Bala and Bala mantras that help one conquer over sleep, fatigue, being not harmed at night, and things like that. We heard these things in relation to the life of Vishwamitra. As they traveled, Vishwamitra became very affectionate towards them. They're behaving like little boys, not like the personality of Godhead. 12-year-old boys can be very curious. They want to know about everything. And so Vishwamitra very kindly and affectionately gave many historical narrations. They come in contact with Tataka. We heard some details about Tataka already. There's a painting showing the first thing she did was made a big dust storm, so they couldn't see for a while. And then she would appear and then disappear and come out of the sky and throw things at them and stuff like that. Ram was reluctant to kill a woman. Vishwamitra gave various reasons why she's to be killed. Ram accepts, and Tataka is killed, pierced in the chest by one of his arrows. And at the end of the Tattakas being killed, the demigods instruct Vishwamitra to bestow celestial weapons. All these pictures have Lakshmana in them. Why we're showing them. And I'm not going into this in detail because we've already discussed. Celestial weapons, how to use them, how to retract them. And they're mystical weapons. They don't just have to go in his quiver there. He just calls them by sound and they come. And he deploys them. One of their main missions was to come to the Siddha ashram, the place where he and the other assistant sages would stay and do yagyas, and to deal with Maricha and Sabahu. So they were there day and night for 6 days, and in the final evening, here come Maricha and Sabahu. And they were finished quickly. Sabahu was killed. Maricha was hit with an arrow that went flying in the air for 100 yojanas and crashed in the sea. Another nice painting of the same. There's Vishwamitra doing his yagya. And there's Maricha and Sabahu getting arrows. And down below, they're finished. There's another more modern painting. The painting shows they're throwing down bones and pus and blood and defiling the sacrificial arena. So after Sabahu and Maricha, of course, there's a couple of other things, but they finally make their way to Mithila. Ram breaks the bow, and there's, as you see, there's an assembly of marriages. Because, again, we heard this already, so I'm just touching on it. But Lakshman is now going to marry Urmila. Urmila is the sister of Sita. So Ram and Lakshman marry Sita and Urmila. And then the brother of King Janak has 2 daughters, and they also come from Ayodhya to marry those 2 daughters. So it's a big festival. And I want to read a section that comes right after this. When they get back, everything is nice for a while. They stay together in Ayodhya for something like 12 years. Is that the right number? Ram is the numbers that I remember is he was to become king when he was 25. So he was married when he was 12. So they had remained together these numbers come from what Sita says to Ravana in Panchavati. He asks, "Who are you?" And he gives some numbers of how old she was. So he was 9 when she was married. Ram was 12 when he was married. And they stayed in Ayodhya for 12 to 13 years. So Ram was around 25. And there's this discussion, time for in the left side, that's Dasarath, and one of his queens by his side. And the other sages are being consulted for anointing him as Prince Regent. Now, they weren't present at the time, but there's Kaikeyi whispering in the ear of Mantra and bringing about this ruination of the plan to have Ram become Prince Regent. We know that whole story, so I won't go into it. She's asking for these 2 boons, and Dasarath is shocked. He finally concedes, not so willingly. And when Ram is brought, Dasarath can't speak, so Kaikeyi speaks. And Ram decides to leave the very day. because this is early in the morning when the installation is to take place. And I'll leave before the end of the day. So he goes to speak to his mother. And this tells something about Lakshman's personality. He first went to see his mother. His mother shocked, and she starts crying. Wailing in this way, Kaushalya, contemplating the calamity about to befall her, Ram was duty-bound to his father and would never oppose his order. He would certainly leave without delay. Unable to bear her suffering, Kaushalya collapsed, sobbing onto a couch. So Lakshman is there, because he accompanied Ram, because he's by his side all the time, to Kaushalya's quarters or chamber. Lakshman stood nearby, writhing in pain. The situation was intolerable. How could Ram accept it? Why did he not do something? Unable to repress his tumultuous anger, transcendental anger, by the way, Lakshman spoke furiously to Kaushalya. I also find Ram's imminent departure to be unacceptable. O glorious lady, Ram should never relinquish the royal fortune for any cause. Perverted by the words of a woman, the king has lost his good sense. He is desirous of sensual enjoyments and has been overpowered by lust and senility. What will he not say, urged by the sinful Kaikeyi? To desire the banishment of the powerful Ram is nothing short of madness. What vice or offense can be found in Ram? There is no man in this world, even if he be Ram's deadly enemy, who could find in him any fault, even in his absence. What man who respects virtue would forsake such a son, who is equal to the gods, disciplined and kindly disposed even to his enemies? What son would heed such command from a father who has abandoned righteousness? He's a hot speaker. Lakshman's furious voice resounded around the chamber. If the king would not give Ram the kingdom, then it should be taken by force. He would stand by his brother with bow in hand, exhibiting his valor. Let anyone who dared try to prevent the installation of Ram. He would hold off the entire city of Ayodhya should they oppose Ram. Whoever supported Bharata would find himself slain by Lakshmana. This situation called for strong action. Why should they accept it meekly? Lakshmana tightly gripped his bow, hanging from his shoulder, and turned to his brother. If, at Kaikeyi's instigation, our father acts like an enemy, then he should be made captive or even killed without compunction. The scriptures make clear that even if a father or a preceptor can be rejected if they lose their discrimination, failing to distinguish between right and wrong. On what authority has the king sought to confer the kingdom upon Kaikeyi's son when it rightfully belongs to you? Breathing hot, heavy sighs, Lakshman turned back to Kaushalya and assured her that Ram would be installed as a king. He held up his bow. "O godly lady, I swear by my bow that I am truly devoted to Ram with the whole of my heart. If Ram enters into blazing fire, or retires to the forest, know that I have already done the same. I shall dispel your sorrow by means of my arms, even as The sun dispels the morning mist. Let your royal highness, along with Ram, witness today my valor. I shall kill my aged and wretched father, who as a result of senility has entered his second childhood. In Kaikeyi's association, Lakshman stood, blazing like fire. Yet Ram remained calm and composed. But then it goes back to Ram speaking to Kaushalya and focusing on Lakshman. So Ram turned towards Lakshman and admonished him, speaking in soft but firm tones. I know your unsurpassed love for me, as well as your strength of arms, which cannot be easily withstood, O noble prince. My gentle mother does not deeply understand the imports of morality and is thus experiencing great agony. My father's command is rooted in righteousness and is therefore worthy of being obeyed. Indeed, I have already given my word to honor his order. I cannot break my pledge, since I have been commanded by Kaikeyi, according to my father's promise, O valiant prince. How can I, knowing well the path of piety, neglect that command? Therefore, give up this unworthy thought of overthrowing the king. Stand firm on righteousness alone, and do not give way to anger and a display of strength. Accept my resolution to follow the royal order. Then again, more discussion with Kaushalya. Ram continues, I feel that both of you, my dear mother and the powerful Lakshmana, have not properly understood my mind. Thus both of you harass me most painfully. Happiness, this is philosophy. Happiness in this world is temporary and ultimately illusory. Only the foolish think themselves to be the body composed of material elements and thus seek sensual happiness. This body, along with its relations and all its sensual joys, exist for only a few moments. The real self is the eternal soul, dwelling in the heart, whose happiness lies only in the pursuit of godly life. Now, it's kind of like a second chapter Bhagavad Gita class, but there's additional emphasis on virtue. There's transcendental knowledge, and there's emphasis on virtue. That's what Ram stands for. Both Kaushalya and Lakshman listened silently as Ram spoke eternal spiritual truths. Ram described how association of friends and relatives was exactly like the coming together of sticks floating in a river, a standard, Bhagavatam example. They are thrown together and very soon parted by the swift current of time. Therefore, one's happiness should never depend upon such ephemeral relationships. One should give up all attachment to the body and fix the mind only on the eternal Supreme Lord, whose order is represented by superiors, such as the king. Again, it's transcendence and virtue. Orders of the superior, that's the virtue part. Mind fixed upon the Supreme Lord, that's the transcendental part. And they go together. He speaks again to his mother. Ram stopped speaking and approached the anguished Lakshmana, who was still incensed with his father and Kaikeyi. Lakshman stood with his eyes opened wide in rage, like an infuriated elephant. Ram gently restrained his devoted brother. This is their relationship. They sometimes work the other way. Lakshman is doing like this with Ram. Control now your anger and grief, O Lakshman. take courage and overlook this seeming offense to myself. Experience instead the joy of assisting our Father to increase his virtue by implementing his pledge. Gentle brother, please send back all the items gathered from my consecration today. Reassure my mother and help me prepare for my departure. Ram placed his hand on Lakshman's shoulder. He was pained to see his brother's distress, but he had no intention of challenging his father. He had to vindicate the king's honor. As long as he remained in Ayodhya, the king would suffer the pain of seeing his truthfulness questioned. Only when Ram had left for the forest, clad in deerskins and wearing matted locks, would Kaikeyi be satisfied and the king's word redeemed. Lakshman looked at the ground. He was burning with the thought of the terrible injustice about to be done to his brother, but he could not possibly defy Ram's desire. Again, Ram put his arm around Lakshman's shoulder and spoke reassuringly. All of this is nice. All of this should be seen as the will of Providence, which can never be flouted. No blame should be attached to Kaikeyi, for it was Providence, with a capital P, alone who moved her to make her request to our Father. How could she have ever decided to send me away? She has always treated me exactly as has my own mother Kaushalya. Surely she was prompted by Providence to say that the king, those terrible words, giving him such grief. I know her to be gentle and kind. She would never, like a vulgar woman, utter words intended to torment both myself and our Father. Now this Providence, with a capital P, is supersoul. And commentary says, Ram within the heart of Kaikeyi prompted her to say what she said. Commentary goes like this. There's two places in the whole of the Valmiki Ramayana where the word yadrichchaya is used. Yadrichchaya is translated different ways, but it means somehow or other. Inexplicably. There's no apparent cause. Yadrichchaya. Yadrichchaya. And the two places it's used is Yadrichchaya, Kaikeyi spoke the way she spoke, and Yadrichchaya, Shurpanakha did what she did. She came and, started to go after Ram and then go after Sita. Prompted by super soul within. So the commentators say these two events were total game-changing events in Ramayana. One is Ram's banishment, and the other is Ram going after Ravana. Ravana stealing Sita for the purpose of his killing of the Rakshasas headed by Ravana. So the game changed because he had been in the forest it was to be in the forest for 14 years, and when Shurpanakha came, it was 12 and a half, almost 13 years. And he hadn't killed any demons yet. Well, any of the Rakshasas yet. And so it was time. And Shurpanakha, created that game-changing dynamic. So this providence prompting can happen, in our lives. We would say karma, but it was totally against Kaikeyi's nature to speak like this. So it was prompted by Ram smiled at Lakshmana, whom he knew had spoken only out of love. He asked him not to lament for that which was unavoidable, decreed by some unseen destiny. Lakshmana should not censure either their father nor Kaikeyi, as they were moved by superior forces. Ram then asked that the sacred waters gathered for his installation be instead used to anoint him at the inauguration of the vow of asceticism. He looked at his younger brother with affection. Beloved Lakshmana, I will soon depart, for this is surely my destiny. Lakshmana stood with his head bent low, pondering his brother's words. His mood swung between distress at Ram's impending exile and delight at his brother's steadfast adherence to virtue. But he was still not fully convinced that it was right for Ram to leave. Furrowing his brow, he hissed like an angry cobra in a hole. His frowning face appeared like that of a furious lion and was difficult to gaze upon. Violently shaking his head and arms, he said to Ram, "Your steady devotion to duty is unequaled. O Ram, but carefully considering the results in this case, by accepting the words of that wicked couple, you are prepared to do something that is condemned by all people. I am surprised that you do not suspect the motives of our father and Kaikeyi. If there were any truth in the story about the boons granted by the king, then why did Kaikeyi not seek their fulfillment long ago?" Lakshmana accused the king of conspiring with Kaikeyi. Dasarath must have surely lost his senses under the influence of lust. Along with a covetous Kaikeyi, he made a sinful plan, quite opposed to any morality. He concluded that the king's authority was therefore fit to be rejected. Please forgive my intolerance, O Raghava, but I cannot accept your present piety, which impels you to take as fate this evil turn of events. Nor can I accept that destiny is supreme. Lakshmana was a heroic and powerful warrior. We're getting a picture of his personality. That's what we're doing. Personalities within Ramayana. Heroic and powerful warrior. His face turned crimson as he went on. Why should one acquiesce to a painful fate as if he is helpless? Only those who are cowardly and weak would trust in destiny alone, Lakshmana argued. The valiant always remain firm in mind. They never become disheartened when their purposes are thwarted by fate. Rather, they exert themselves with all power. Lakshmana stood before Ram with his bow held high. Today, you shall see me rushing at the enemy like an uncontrollable king of elephants. Not even all the gods united together will prevent your consecration today. Those who support your exile will find themselves either deprived of life or sent to the forest. I will dash the hopes of our father and Kaikeyi. Anyone opposing me will find no shelter in destiny, as my fierce strength ruthlessly cuts him down. Lakshmana drew his sword, cleaved it in the air. He gave full vent to his rage. The right time for Ram to retire to the forest had certainly not arrived. He should rule the globe for thousands of years. Only when his own sons were ready to take his place should he leave for the forest. That was the proper course of virtue. Lakshman seemed about to consume the earth as he spoke. If you fear censure for the seeming sinful act of rejecting father's order, you should not worry. I shall personally guard you in every way and forcibly repel all those who object to your accepting the kingdom, even as the coastline holds back the ocean. O Ram, allow yourself to be installed today. I alone am able to prevent any impediments to the ceremony. These arms of mine are not meant simply to add to my attractiveness, nor is this bow a mere ornament. nor are my sword and quivers of arrows hanging on my body as badges of honor. All these are meant for crushing the enemy. Today you will see arrows released like incessant showers of rain. You will witness my sword flashing like lightning as it cuts down all those who stand before me. The earth will be thickly covered with the arms, legs, and heads of heroes. Hewn down by my sword, enemies will drop like so many meteors falling from the sky. While I stand on the battlefield with uplifted weapons, how can any man alive be proud of his strength today? I shall demonstrate the king's helplessness and establish your unopposed sovereignty. Tell me, which of your enemies should this day be deprived of life, fame, and relations? Instruct me how to proceed so that this wide earth will be brought under your control. O glorious Lord of our race, I am here to do your bidding alone. Ram wiped away his brother's angry tears. He knew Lakshman was only speaking out of his devotion to him. Lakshmana knew that ultimately he had to follow Ram. He knew Ram could not possibly act against religion or morality. Nevertheless, in his pain, he expressed his powerful feelings. Ram perfectly understood Lakshman's mind, and he comforted him. O gentle brother, you should know that I am firmly obedient to my superior's command. This is the path trodden by the righteous. Be firm and control your grief and anger. That will be the most pleasing to me. So there's a nice painting that shows these two. I didn't go into what Kaushalya was feeling and expressing, but the painting shows. And you see the left arm of Ram reaching down and holding the hand of Lakshman so he won't use his sword out of control. And he departs Kaushalya's quarters and goes next to see Sita. And that's the end for this evening's chivalrous talk. And tomorrow morning we'll hear some more about his appeal to Ram to let him go with him. This also tells a lot about his personality. I mean, this is a fiery side, a chivalrous side. But it's flowing from his ardent love and attachment to Ram. And his whole life is dedicated like that. $8:00. I had to read it. It was like too good to not read. So let's see if there's some discussion. Kind of late already. We're going for an hour and a half. He's conked out, huh? How you do? Comments? Discussion? Yes. Can you take the microphone so people that are remote can hear?
So Gurudev, in one of the slide, it's showing Ram killed Marichi Subaro. So I, as far as I know, he didn't kill.
He did not kill Varichi. You're right. I didn't say he didn't kill. You're right. He hit it. I said he hit him with an arrow. He went flying 800 miles or 100 yojanas in the air, landed in the sea. He didn't kill him.
Thank you.
Okay.
That was the doubt.
Okay.
So Maharaj, you mentioned about we looking at Lakshmana in terms of him representing Guru Tattva.
Yes.
So I was little confused by what he just spoke out of rage. So if I were just reading Ramayana, the verses that you just read, And Guru Tattva, I mean, somebody representing Guru Tattva speaking those words, I would probably not comprehend.
Sure. Mundane expressions like that are arising from the modes of nature. Lakshman's words like that are arising out of love. There's primary rasas and there's secondary rasas. And he's experiencing and expressing a secondary rasa, chivalry. Secondary rasas, like the primary rasas, they're pure. And, sometimes Krishna would speak really strong, chivalrous words. And, but it's transcendental. So I'll share a little personal experience with Prabhupada. I saw Prabhupada exhibit transcendental anger. The nature of transcendental anger is it's used when it's needed and it's gone when it's not needed. Because mundane anger controls the person even after the situation is completed. So he's in this transcendental chivalry mood out of love, his friendship and service mood to Ram. Because he's his brother, but he's looking up like the elder brother and just wanting to protect him and be with him and serve him and be to his pleasure. So that's the mood of a representative of the Lord. And Ram understands. He doesn't do any of those things. He's waiting for the word. You give the word and I'll do all these things. You don't need to, so. Yeah, normally gurus don't do stuff like that. You're right. But they may. They may act in a very chivalrous way. There's a really nice story about King Kulashekar. You know who's King Kulashekar? You've heard his name before? Prayers of King Kulashekar. Prabhupada liked some of those prayers of King Kulashekar. And he was an ardent devotee of Ram. He's not the personality of Godhead, as Lakshman is the personality of Godhead. But he was one of the primary alvars in the Sri Sampradaya. So there's a story, a description. One time he was hearing Ramayana and he heard that Sita was kidnapped. And he entered into a mood of ecstasy. He grabbed his sword. It said, "Gather my army. We're going at once to Lanka." And he went charging out the door. And his army followed him. And he got to the southern tip of India. And he was wading into the water with his sword raised in the air. "I'll get that Ravan. I'll bring back Sita." It's a transcendental ecstasy. And his ministers helped him, not drown, come back. And so sometimes in an ecstatic mood, the primary rasa is, secondary rasas seem to overwhelm the primary rasa. They haven't overwhelmed. The primary rasa is still the primary rasa, but the secondary rasa is becoming prominent. And that's what Lakshman is doing. Chivalrous move. Protect Ram. It's not ordinary. Ordinary, this doesn't happen, but it's for extraordinary personality on another platform of consciousness. Yes?
Even though the same person, avatar, why is
Why?
Yeah.
Because that's the Lord's arrangement. That this is the Bhagavatam now, but specifically, those killed by Krishna get that special benediction. You want to know why? Because he gives that special benediction, because he's Krishna.
Killed Hiranyakashipu.
Was he? No. Well, how is he liberated? Because he came back again, didn't he? Was he liberated or not liberated? If he came back again, how was he liberated?
I've heard.
Okay,
but it
but
was a
just
special
use your common sense. If he was liberated, how did he come back again? He went somewhere. And if he was liberated, then how did he come back again?
Thank you. Thank you, Guru.
Next.
I had a question as aspect for technical Varga that you mentioned.
About the which?
Veers. I remember the heaven where
It's
the
not described in any detail at all. I had to do a lot of research to find it. It's mentioned lightly, but where is it? What is it? There's no detail given. All that it said is there is such a place, and Kshatriyas who are killed on the battlefield, they go to that place. Don't have any further description. It's in the heavenly realm, and it's a place where those people go.
one more question on the Vali time that you mentioned. So Vali, he had this. He felt that he was innocent because when he was in the cave, Sugriva covered
Yes.
the cave.
Yes.
And in all those 13 explanations or the questions that Vali was asking, allegations, I mean, that thing was not answered by, at least in the slides. I mean, because from his point of view, he was wronged. He was in the cave. He asked his brother to stand outside.
But it was a misunderstanding. He wasn't wrong. What Sugriva did was, with the understanding that it was his brother that was killed, he wanted to protect the citizens from Mayavi. It was, protect the citizens motive. He wasn't wronged. And knowing that he wasn't wronged, because when he came back, Sugriva was, you're become the king and I'll serve you as was before. But it was one of those things, a misunderstanding of intention. The intention was good, not bad. So my brother is wrong was just a misunderstanding on his part, on Vali's part. In the world, it happens. Someone does something and their conduct and their intention is misunderstood. Isn't it? Then do this one. Has it ever happened to you? The answer is going to be yes. Has it ever happened to you that you'd go out of your way to do something as a service to somebody else, pleasing to someone else, and you read it just the opposite? Is there something wrong that you've done when they've read it just the opposite? They read it just the opposite. So Vali was thinking just the opposite. He was chasing Vali all over the planet to kill him. And Sugriva was running for his life all over the planet. And he only stopped because he had this curse of Sage Matunga. That was the only place on the planet he could go where Vali wouldn't go. But otherwise, he was like, he's the wrongdoer. Look what he did. Put this rock in but if he can put the rock, then he can push the rock. If Sugriva can put the rock, then Vali can push the rock. Come on. I mean, he's stronger than his brother. And his brother said, oh, you take this from me? Kill you. Anyway, the
He almost,
misunderstanding
yeah.
wasn't the wrong. Vali was the wrongdoer. Sugriva was not the wrong.
Holding on to that story
Yes,
where he's the
yes,
victim,
yes,
whereas he was
yes,
not.
yes.
And
Even an explanation was given. It's a misunderstanding. Brother, I'm subservient. And if I've done something wrong, please. Looks to you like I've done something wrong, but anyway, he was holding on to it. The misunderstanding, perception, wrong that his brother had done. Anything else?
thank you.
Online, anything? 12 after 8.